Hark the bardic paladin, who sings and plays again. He tells the tales of glory, and weaves a magic story. He'll join you at your table, and ask you to share a fable. Heroes of humble origin, villains who must be fought again. No matter their skill or prowess, the people in life are countless. So we pray you heed our request. Enjoy this tale of sidekicks and side quests.
Episode 138, Ambrose Eusebius, the Hidden Heretic. Welcome to Sidekicks and Side Quests, the Dungeons & Dragons podcast that helps to put humans back into humanity and breathe life into your campaign NPCs with backstory and bravado. That's right, we're building a world, one character at a time. I am your host, Kurt Krenwelge, the Bardic Paladin, and I'll be joining Matt from Roleplay Chat's table in the Levitating Platter. Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of Sidekicks and Side Quests, the best unofficial Dungeons & Dragons podcast, in my humbly biased opinion. I've got an awesome guest for you this week, but before we get to my guest, I have to leave you in suspense with the first ad read. This episode is brought to you by Plus One EXP and their brand new RPG Zine Club. Zine Club is a monthly membership subscription service featuring fresh zines from emerging and expanding creators across the globe. It's our way of inviting GMs, players, and zine lovers everywhere to invest more intentionally in the creative community. It's crowdsourced support without crowdfunding. So this service offers monthly releases that they put out in two 20 to 44 page saddle stitch zines. 3 different flavors. Take your pick from story zines, adventure zines, and all of the zines. You can pick your format of print and digital, or just get digital only for your favorite titles. Join the Clubhouse Discord section of the Plus One EXP community on Discord. Get the best prices guaranteed from your subscription that you're going to get each month. You get a private subscription portal where you can manage your subscription, add products, or change your information. Change your frequency monthly, every other month, something else. You pick how often you want these new titles to arrive. You only get what you want. And if you miss a month, why, you can always go back and add a title to your recent month's order. Get an annual surprise each February after your first anniversary. Get access to special content with interviews, how to play videos, special content for Zine Club titles. Get a free pizza if you fill out one of the RPG Zine Club passports, or redeem it for a free pizza at events where Tony is present himself. You're going to get access to new and known designers, the best voices from across the RPG design community. And know that Plus One EXP and RPG Zine Club curate their zines based on community interest and feedback to help you discover your new favorite creators. There's a DIE focus because Plus One is committed to championing diversity, inclusion, and equity in their projects. Creators with diverse experiences make our community better. So Zine Club prioritizes creating equity for all of our creators. And it's more than a purchase. Your subscriptions will let us invest more heavily in our print partners and provide them with potentially life-changing support by consolidating scores or hundreds of purchases as the club grows. So, if you want to learn more, I would recommend that you go to the website rpgzine.club. Again, rpgzine.club. And if you want, go to plusoneexp.com. And when you're buying stuff on that site, beard balms or lip balms or beard RPGs or whatnot, and you need a discount code at checkout, be sure to use the code Randolph, RANDOLPH, at checkout and get some savings on your purchase at no extra cost to you. Again, website is plusoneexp.com, and the Zine Club website is rpgzine.club. All right, and without further ado, I turn the microphone over to my guest, and I ask, hello, mystery contestant, would you care to introduce yourself, tell us who it is that you are, and what is it that you do?
Hello. Well, thank you for having me first and foremost. I'm super excited to be on your show. It's so much fun just getting to riff, talk gaming, talking roleplay. I'm Matt. I also talk about role playing games on my podcast, Roleplay Chat. So if you guys like side quests, you're gonna love Roleplay Chat as well. It's a little less action focused. We're more philosophical in Roleplay Chat, but it's a
Hmm.
TTRPG discussion podcast with all kinds of cool guests, a new guest every episode. And yeah, that's me. I'm roll_play_chat on all socials, and I like talking games. So I'm super pumped to be doing it today.
Yeah, and I just had the pleasure literally this morning of like, oh, I follow role play chat on like most of the social medias. But it's like, oh, right, it's a podcast. Yeah. So I went on my podcast app and I followed it. And so I'm kind of like a purist, a completionist, like in video games. So I'm like, well, I obviously have to go all the way to the very beginning. And so hearing your episode 0, when you said you recorded it back in the middle of your third season of like, this is how the show like started and this is how it works now moving forward. So I'm very interested to hear you and your co-host at the beginning of your show talking together. And then as time goes on, as I was scrolling and looking through the massive catalog of episodes you have, you've had the opportunity to interview quite a number of people from the hobby, haven't you?
Yeah, no, it's been a blast. It's really been a blessing. I've gotten the opportunity to really grow as a content creator. Like you said, the show started off as just two dudes talking about games and recording our advice, and it quickly snowballed into kind of like this talk show, this kind of like role play talk show with various guests. Um, some of the big names that I've had the chance to talk to include Brennan Lee Mulligan, Seth Skorkowski. Not too long ago, I got the opportunity to talk to Diana of the Rose, who is a new face in the space that's growing like crazy. Anyway, lots of really fun folks, and then a lot of cool indie creators too. Kind of spread the love between some of the big names and some of the smaller names, and every single person had just as much insight to share. So it was a lot of fun. It's been good.
So that's amazing and inspiring because that's kind of like the ethos with this podcast as well. Is like I would love to talk to big name people, and I have been blessed very much so to have Johnny Stanton the fourth on twice, three times on, and
Nice.
then Travis Frederick and Beth May. Dr. Emily Friedman was our most recent episode at the time of this recording. So I've had personal friends and family and coworkers and all that. So I've ran the gamut as well. And I would agree with your belief and sentiment that like there's a lot of wisdom and there's a lot of cool insights that we can get from everyone. Not just the people that we anoint. So-called in the hobby to be like, these are the opinions we need to listen to because they matter. It's like, well, no, no, no. Like everyone belongs at the table and everyone has a story.
That's it. That's it. And it's kind of like it becomes this echo chamber. Sometimes I worry where, some of the bigger, heavier voices say something, and then it kind of reverberates. Is that the
Mhm.
word? It finds its way and it just kind of echoes,
Well,
and
maybe
there's like variations.
reverberates is a good word because it's like a river, and then it reverbs. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, yeah, we'll go with that. We coined here. Everyone, you heard it here first.
Ooh.
We'll see if that echoes through. We'll see if we have enough weight class in in the TTRPG discourse wheel of time.
Right.
Um, but no, you're right. It's a blessing of a community, and I think if folks listening aren't super involved, maybe this could be your call to action. Jump on Threads, jump on Blue Sky, create yourself like a role playing game account where you just follow a bunch of cool folks, make some friends. It's a good time, definitely.
It's just the eternal struggle with me being, the 36-year-old dad of a young toddler, is just kind of like, man, I'm an elder millennial. I don't have time to do this. I'm a one-man band. I don't have a time to do this grinding of like social media. It's like I do so much, involved in working alongside social media in my day job. It's like this is my hobby. I just want to enjoy it. Now, certainly it's like I want to use the tools that are available to me to like spread, all these characters out for everyone to use to hear these interesting and cool conversations, but I don't need to beat you over the head with it. It's just like, if you find it fun and interesting, great. And if you don't, well, hopefully you're not leaving me bad podcast reviews or something like that.
You know what they say, when you get a bad podcast review, you know you made it. You gotta have some of them just to be like, yeah, that's my battle scar.
True. Yeah. I guess I have to wait for the one random YouTube comment to come along, and then I could wear that like a badge of honor, I suppose.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah, so as we're two fellow podcasters talking to each other, hopefully not falling into too many of the tropes. I did see a very funny video. I believe he's an Irishman, but he was like the two Johnnies of like very upper crust sort of British people talking back and forth. So I was like, hopefully we're not going to fall into that trap of like, we're just two D&D podcasters talking at each other or whatever. But no, we're going to have a conversation. We're going to have fun today.
Well, hopefully, Kurt, then you're gonna have to like delete that one question where it's like the best times to post on social media according to audience, right? And then the best times to publish episodes. We might want to not talk about that. We'll have to scrap that from
Right. Right. Yeah. It's like, I don't even, it's all just fun and games, literally, so no gaming the algorithms here. The only games we're playing are D&D and TTRPGs, and that's the only game you should be playing. Ding, ding, the more you know. That was totally the wrong noise. I know that was the reading rainbow noise, and I know the more you know is kind of like a violin or harp.
Yeah,
Goodness.
I actually have no idea what you're talking about, so I'm gonna take your word for it.
Wait, how
No,
old?
reading rainbow, I know about. But
Okay,
the more you
okay.
know, like I can't think of the jingle.
Yeah, it's something like that. It may slightly predate me, but I just being a kid perpetually growing up in the 90s and watching a lot of TV, it's like you just saw these things, and then you explain things to the younger generation. They're like, we have no context or a basis for what you're talking about. It's like, I have so much to teach you before it's too late. No, but this is a D&D podcast. We're having fun. And so, as Matt has alluded to, his podcast, they're having maybe not quite the theological discussions, but at least the philosophical discussions present there in the world of D&D, in the hobby in general. So goes without saying with this question, but do you currently, or have you ever played Dungeons and Dragons before?
Well, Kurt, I've played my fair share, definitely, of Dungeons and Dragons. I've been a game master for over 10 years, almost 14 years, I think, at this point. Yeah, almost 14 years of being a game master or dungeon master. Definitely started myself in the hobby, as most of us do, cutting our teeth on Dungeons and Dragons. The first edition of Dungeons and Dragons that I game mastered was 3.5. Didn't get a whole lot of airtime with that. Spent most of my time game mastering 4th edition and then 5th edition.
4th edition. There we go. That's the one I cut my teeth on.
Yeah, it's a good time. You know what? I feel like it gets a bad reputation, but there's a lot of really interesting things that system did that I think that, we learned from and that we can now use in current games. But
yeah,
and that's, I run a game once a week, or no, sorry, once every 2 weeks, every other Sunday for my neighbors and some friends. It's a home game set in my own homebrew world. That's been going on for, 2+ years now. And I do like to dabble in other games. Call of Cthulhu is one that I really enjoy. I like, especially now that it's, I don't know when this is being released, but as we're recording this, it's close to Halloween. So
yeah,
I do like my spooky, scary games. 10 Candles is a really fun one. And then, other simpler games with less crunch, like the Fate system is one that I really like running. It's kind of straightforward, very simple, easy to introduce new players to the hobby, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Like I said, fourth edition certainly was impactful for me. And that's where I also started to learn to DM as well. Cause my group,
Nice.
we're all college kids. And so it was like when one of us thought of an idea, it's like the dungeon master seat rotated. So like that's where I quickly learned of like,
Cool.
oh, I can't railroad because like if they hadn't figured out the one thing by chance, then it wouldn't have worked. So there's a lot of lessons I learned in that time frame, and then coming up through fifth edition. So now fifth edition's been what I've been running the longest, and I'm still on the 2014 rules. I know the newer stuff's come on, and there's like things that I'm hearing that are cool, and I'm like, great, I'll just steal that. I don't know if I need to go buy new books, but like that sounds good, and and I, as an accountability thing to me, we did record another parlay at the platter where we talked about games and design and play, and I need to work on it, and it should be really fun. We had a lot of great discussion between our panelists, so hopefully this will serve as a good reminder for me, maybe as a way to get pandering to social media engagement. You should just bug me on social media, be like, hey, when's that parlay at the platter thing coming out, and then I'll make sure it gets taken care of. But that's awesome. And to hear of so much of the games you're enjoying, like I feel personally that like 4E is going to have its spiritual successor with the Draw Steel MCDM that's coming out, since they did so well on their Dusk campaign. And, Matt Colville talks very
Hmm.
highly of like the lessons that can be learned in 4E to bring into 5E into our other current games. Certainly been enjoying Dungeons and Daddy's third season, which is an entirely Call of Cthulhu campaign. So a number of the games you mentioned, having had played or are very interested in play, or I like to listen to things that have those games in them. So yeah.
Yeah, they're fun, and I feel like it can be a really good opportunity to experience different kinds of mechanics in a game. I remember back in the good old days running fourth edition and thinking of like, oh, I wonder how great would it be if there was this cool mechanic for sanity. Well, guess what? Call of Cthulhu literally has a sanity mechanic that you could borrow and transplant into your game if you wanted to. Or, oh, I want to run a heist game. I wish I could do flashbacks. Well, guess what? Blades in the Dark has an amazing flashback mechanic. Let's just borrow that. And you don't have to change the game that you're playing to be inspired by other games and make the most out of those kind of like little tidbits of rules. And someone else has done all the work for you. They've play tested it. The balance is sort of there already. So you don't have to go and make your own your own rules. You can just borrow other ones.
Right. Yeah. Where I spent quite a long while working on my own version of a reskinned fifth edition for Fallout. And then Modifius finally comes out with like a Fallout game where I'm like, oh, well, this would have saved me a lot of time and effort if I just waited for this to show up.
Yeah. It's easy to fall into that trap. I feel like even as a veteran game master, you'll sometimes think of like, oh, it would be so cool if I could do this. And then you put your game designer hat on, even though I'm not a game designer. I don't know how to do any of that stuff, but you're using math and coming up with probabilities and stuff. And then all it would have taken was a quick Google search to find out that, yeah, oh, there's an Alien RPG out. I don't have to reskin, I don't know, some sci-fi game to make it an Alien game. It literally exists.
Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah. So, like on our recent episode that we had with Dr. Emily Friedman, she encouraged everyone to have a good gaming diet and to try and play other games to, find those points of inspiration. So that, that way, if you're wanting to do something new or cool and exciting in your game, you don't have to stop playing the game, but you can be like you were saying, oh, we want to do like a heist mechanic. Then let's quickly switch over to Blades in the Dark. And maybe we're running the low level people in our order that are going to carry out this heist. Or like, oh, we're going to journey into the far realm. Okay, let's turn this into a Call of Cthulhu one shot or something like that with the brave souls who are going to try and go fight Cthulhu or whatever. So yeah, very cool.
Definitely.
Well, with this podcast, it is called Sidekicks and Side Quests, so I would be remiss if I didn't ask you who happens to be your favorite NPC or sidekick character, whether they be from one of the many RPGs you've played or a video game, movie, film, television, literature, etc.? And why is this character your favorite sidekick or favorite NPC?
Okay, so Kurt, you're gonna have to stop me if this isn't allowed. But I have an NPC that I've used in my games that is my own creation, um, and he is bar none my favorite NPC of all time. Uh, is that allowed in this segment, or should
Oh
I
yeah.
should I stick to
I
something that
mean,
exists that the listeners will kind of recognize
oh
instead?
no, it's fine. You know, I asked a fair question of who happens to be your favorite. If it's one that you've invented, that's fair play.
Sweet, sweet. Well, then I'm going to talk to you guys and introduce the listeners to Scrub. Scrub is a vile little dirty man with a hunched back and a wart covered face and big boogly eyes that works for your quote unquote local thieves guild. So, whatever
Mm,
kind of system you're running, whatever kind of genre it is, I imagine you probably have a thieves guild. And Scrub is a he appears on the surface to be a low-level grunt for the Thieves Guild. In reality, he's actually quite high up in the Thieves Guild, but he has been cursed by a deity, whatever deity you want it to be in your world. In my world, it's Aura Aura, who's a trickster god. So whatever your trickster god is, Scrub has been cursed by that person to be absolutely miserable at everything except for things that revolve around dexterity and stealth. He remains a master of dexterity and stealth. He can hide from anybody in any time. It's just that he's incredibly prone to being sick. He's incredibly prone to getting injured. He has absolutely no charisma whatsoever. He's like the most vile little man you'll ever talk to. And the reason why I love playing him so much is because he's just so goofy. He's really, really goofy. Uh, his voice is inspired by, and now this is kind of a weird reference, but you know, in Aladdin, when like the old Disney cartoon,
mm,
when the genie uh, starts listing off rules and provisos that
mm.
Aladdin can't make wishes for.
Right,
There's one of these provisos where he says that he can't bring people back from the dead, and
right.
he puts on this voice that I'm sure is a caricature or he's like interpreting somebody else that I don't know who it is, but he's doing this voice that sounds like this like grimy little man. And that is Scrub. Scrub talks like this. Scrub is a vile man. He likes to hide in the shadows. He likes to find his way around town. He likes to learn all the secrets of all of the people and sell those secrets. So anyway, that's Scrub, and he was kind of born out of kind of thin air, but based on these references to that kind of, I feel like that kind of character exists in a lot of these grim dark worlds already. Kind of gives me Adam's family vibes too. Anyway, that's Scrub. He's my favorite NPC, and I love him a lot.
Well, I am proud to say, with the power of the internet, that the particular person that Robin Williams, the voice actor of Genie from the cartoon version of the Aladdin movie, he was doing a impression of an actor by the name of Peter Lorre. Of course, was
Okay.
born in Slovakia back in 1904, and he passed away in Los Angeles, California, back in 1964. So he was a Hungarian American actor. So yeah, so some of his big films, including M, Passage to Marseille, The Maltese Falcon, Casablanca, The Raven, The Man Who Knew Too Much, Arsenic and Old Lace, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, just to name a few. So
Wow. Okay,
Peter
this is like
Lorre
a big
was
name.
that particular gentleman you can't bring back from the dead kind of guy.
That's it.
Mine sort of started blending into Adam Sandler, so maybe perhaps Adam Sandler's dipping into some Peter Lorre too. Who knows?
Possibly. I mean, now that you say that, and the Adam Sandler reference, I feel like there was a bunch of this character also appeared in like a bunch of Looney Tunes caricatures too. Um,
Mm.
Now I can't quite put my pin on it, but
Well, he definitely
That's
lived
awesome.
during the pinnacle, the golden age of cartoon animation. So I'm sure Peter Lorre got like all the cred, and just was a very distinctive voice. It was like, oh yeah, so that's how Robin Williams was able to do that poll and talk about, I can't raise the dead. So
That's it. Yeah, yeah. So anyway, that's awesome. I didn't know that. Now I'm gonna go look up a bunch of Peter Lorre like impersonators so that I can
yeah.
make Scrub even better.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's the gift that I feel like this podcast is I am just a giver outer of knowledge and information and useless trivia facts that then can inspire other people to go do things and be awesome. So there we go.
Yeah, that's great. That's
And
great.
then continuing on as well, what happens to be one of your favorite side quests or B plot elements? Again, same criteria, whether it's an RPG, video game, movie, film, television, literature, etc. And why is this side quest or B plot element your favorite?
So I'm a really big fan of heists. I feel like heists and crash and grab type operations, that kind of stuff, is it's a lot. It can be a lot of fun, but
Mm-hmm.
if that's all you're getting, it kind of becomes too much of the same. So
Mm-hmm.
one of my favorite side quests is a Skyrim side quest
Mm.
where you have to go. I believe it's like there's like a party happening, and you have to go to the where this party is happening and basically destroy or sabotage three things of honey mead that are kind of the scattered across the premises of this establishment while the party is happening. So you can't be found out. You got to destroy as many of the mead barrel, honey barrel things, the operations as you can, and then escape without causing too much of a ruckus. And the reason this is one of my favorite side quests is because I feel like it offers a lot of agency to the people playing the game to tackle the side quest however they'd like to. Do they want to be super, super sneaky and just make sure nobody sees them? Okay, you can do that. Do they want to be social and interact in the party and maybe like gain a couple favors from somebody to allow access to the places where this, the operations are taking place, and you can sabotage it that way? Do you want to kind of do a mix of the both? Or do you just want to run in as fast as you can, not care about whether or not anybody sees you, and just be, run in, run out, and just hope that you don't come into trouble? And if you do, you just hit them hard enough so that they can't remember you. And that's kind of the inspiration for a lot of my games. Whenever I come up with a heist game or like a side quest that's related to something like this,
Mm-hmm.
I always try to stick to those principles where I try to give my players an interesting scenario that they can resolve, from whatever pillar of the game they feel like they want to kind of pursue in that particular instance. Um, and I mean, Skyrim is just a great game too. I think I sunk hundreds of hours in Skyrim, so there's that too.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's definitely one of those repeat playable games. And you hear about people like going on YouTube and Twitch, and they're just like, we're still playing Skyrim. They've still got ridiculous mods for it. What else can we do? Or like, we're gonna do this kind of playthrough. Yeah, and then people are just fascinated. It is proven to be a reoccurring hit that Bethesda produced, certainly.
Yeah, it's a good time.
So yeah, I personally have not successfully ever dipped my toes into any of the Elder Scroll games. I know my wife loves Skyrim, and I remember when Skyrim came out when I was in college, and I definitely had those friends that like disappeared when that game
Mm-hmm.
came out because they were just like, I have to play it so much. Kind of like how it is with Baldur's Gate 3 currently at the time of this recording. But yeah,
Yeah, it's a good
we've got
time.
it, and so it's there. So whenever I feel the call of the mountains and the Fus Rodas, then I can boot it up and awake from my coma to the guy being like, "Oh, you're awake. Welcome. Ready to begin your adventure."
That's it. That's it. In the back of the cart with the shackles on, and there's no better way to start a game. Maybe in a tavern. I'm sure that's a
Mm.
hot take. I'm sure people will be mad at me for saying that.
well, speaking of Bethesda, another game, and early listeners of the podcast will know how much I've talked about Fallout 76. Now, just last night, having had the opportunity to play after a long while. And there's a fun little Easter egg for Skyrim and Fallout 76. If you go to one part of the map, you can find a tractor pulling a wagon, and there's two guys in the back of the wagon that are just tied up. So it's like, there's my Skyrim reference of them being carted away. So it's
Awesome.
like, very cool.
Yeah, I mean, if you could permit me, another great one in the Fallout universe is the now I can't remember what it's called. Not the Academy. What's that place that like the world of synths? It's like the underground.
Oh, the Institute.
The Institute. That's it. That's a really cool B plot too. Maybe it's not quite a B plot, but it's its own arc in the story of Fallout. And
right.
I find that really, really fascinating. This like self-contained pressure cooker environment where things can go wrong. It's just prime for fun adventures to happen.
Indeed. Also, a reminder that I still need to actually finish my playthrough of Fallout 4. I got like a good chunk into it, and then I just 76 came out, and then I wanted to be me in 76, and so I've just been my own adventurer in Appalachia. So that's been my jam. So and then the way that we round out the personal interview section of the podcast, so we don't rattle and prattle on too long. Matt, what are you passionate about and why?
What am I passionate about? Well, Kurt, I think it's probably the same thing as you. I'm passionate about talking about role-playing games. I quite literally started a podcast because the people in my life were like, Matt, we don't want to hear you talk about this anymore. Go find an outlet. So definitely role-playing games and getting the opportunity to dissect them. I think it's just such an incredibly rich and deep hobby that we have. There's so many ways to play it. None of those ways are wrong, so long as the people that are at the table all agree with the way that you're playing and everyone's having a good time, then you're playing right. And I think that that's kind of the beauty of this, is that it offers us the opportunity to just take any single element of it and talk about it for hours. So it's something that I'm definitely passionate about. I'm also, as you mentioned, I'm really passionate about getting as many voices as I can to talk about their experiences with role-playing games. There's so many people with so many backgrounds and so many unique perspectives on the way that we play this game and the way that we live generally. So getting to hear from a lot of different folks is it's always eye-opening too. You think you understand something, and then somebody throws in an interesting perspective, and I'm like, oh my gosh, maybe that's my opinion now too. I don't know. I have to think about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we live on a planet with billions of people, and everyone's got a story, and it's just, it's mind bending and mind boggling, and it's awe inspiring. Just like here and now, I exist and I live, and I'm wonderfully made and created. And here we all are telling stories. We're like our ancestors of yore who just, after a long day of hunting and gathering and surviving, what do? We get around the fire, we tell stories, we play games, we drink, and we make merry, and we celebrate our lives, and we celebrate each other in our communities. So it's what we're doing now, except we're using funny polyhedral dice, and we sometimes use goofy voices. So
Exactly. So yeah, it's a good time. And I mean, maybe to add dimension a little bit, I also love gardening. Gardening's a blast.
Ooh.
I just harvested all of my plants and all the seeds, and any day now it's going to snow up here. I'm in Ottawa, Canada, so any day it's going to snow. So I'm just waiting on it. Hopefully it's after Halloween so that my kids can go trick or treating without having their snowsuits on.
Oh yeah. Well, bully for you for your gardening. I mean, I know we've made our small attempt here in North Texas, and the weather wasn't exactly kind to us this year. So better luck next time, I guess. So, but very cool. And I feel like, we've had a great conversation here in the personal interview section, that now I think it's time to head into some NPC creation.
Let's do it.
And NPC creation is brought to you by you, the podcast audience, and our patrons from Patreon. So now's the time of the show where we give a shout out to our comfortable patrons and above with a loud hurrah. Just a miniature can of Dr. Pepper. Don't worry. Remember to consume and drink responsibly out there. You people driving and listening to this podcast, be careful. Both hands on the wheel, 10 and 2. Anyway, yes. So our patrons, we like to shout them out. So, of course, our queen of the Patreon, Goblin Katie, a.k.a. Katie Downey, as well as our other wealthy patrons, Anson Jablinski and good old mom and dad Krenwogi, we say cheers. So, again, all these folks are a part of the Patreon community, and they get to introduce what's called an element of chance. So we have some random tables here for the podcast. So if our guests want to, mix things up and roll the dice, well, we give our Patreon supporters the opportunity to throw in a little bit of chaos in there and just see what we can get to mix it up. So if you would like to learn more about all the various rewards and things that we have waiting for you in the Levitating Platter, you should go to the show notes below. You should go to the podcast website or just go directly to patreon.com/sidekicks and side quests. Find out about the accommodations we have awaiting for you in the Levitating Platter. Help us to grow and expand our operations in this demiplane and worlds beyond. And Kofi's a thing too. So if you don't like Patreon, Ko-fi, ba-ding. All right, so now that all that business is out of the way, yes, this is NPC creation. So we were kind of chit-chatting before we started hitting all the recording buttons. So Matt, what are we doing today? Are we going to just kind of like walk our way through the questions and discover an NPC? Are we going to roll the dice, or what are we going to do?
Maybe a bit of a mix and a match. So I've got sort of an idea for character, but there's definitely some elements there that can be improvised, we'll leave it up to the patrons to decide for us. And I'm sure the people listening that aren't patrons are like, oh, I wish I could add something cool to Matt's character. So they're going to have to go and become a patron of your show too, to be able to add some cool stuff.
Exactly.
So let's do it.
Okay. Yeah. So then the first thing to determine for our NPC is the name of the character. So do you have a name figured out, or do you need to roll for it?
Yeah, I do have a name. So this character, maybe very briefly, I'll mention that this was an NPC that I ran briefly during a one-shot some time ago. It probably 3 years ago. So I have a very vague memory of who this person was. But, kind of a secret of the trade is that oftentimes the NPCs that the game master is improvising, they don't really know who they are either.
Right.
So I'm hoping that, we can flesh out Ambrose. His name is Ambrose, and I don't have a last name for him.
A good saintly name, yeah.
I don't.
Ambrose.
That's it. Yeah.
Perfect.
Ambrose.
Excellent. Okay.
I don't know if your random table has like last names. Can we get a last name out of one of these? Is that something?
If you would like to, I think a number of these responses are going to be maybe more first name, but there are people who have like first name sounding last names. So if you want to roll a D20 and see if it's something, we could do that.
Let's do it. I feel like that would suit Ambrose to have like Henry or something as his last name. All right. Am I rolling, or are you rolling?
Yeah, I let the guest roll.
Okay, I got an 8. What do we got?
8. Oh, this is interesting. Okay, so your answer provided by previous guest Kevin Eusebius, which is also a very strong name. So EUSEBIUS. So Ambrose Eusebius.
That is intense.
Yeah, I'm getting like a Roman gladiator, or like a commander of a legion or something like that. I am Ambrose Eusebius. Or I was just listening to the Dungeons and Daddies on the way home, and they just released their Dad Hammer 40K episode. So I was like, oh, Ambrose Eusebius also kind of sounds like something I would hear in Warhammer or something like that.
It's really funny you say that because Ambrose was in Warhammer, like he was in a Warhammer Fantasy roleplay game. So Eusebius is
Ah,
a perfect last name for
perfect.
Ambrose.
All right. And then what's the ancestry of Ambrose Eusebius?
I mean, he was human. Let's go with human. I know that's
Human?
kind of like,
Okay. Yeah,
yeah,
I like
human.
it. You know, you have humans that exist in D&D too. It's not always just elves and dwarves and tieflings. I know everyone loves tieflings and changelings and all these other ones, but you got to have
That's it.
humans too. Yeah. So there we go. Human. All
Yeah.
right. And then let's see. What is the job or role in society that Ambrose Eusebius has?
Yeah. So Ambrose is a Shalia exterminator priest. And a Shalia priest in the Warhammer world is they're kind of like healers, but a
Hmm.
very small window of Shalia priests hunt uh, disease. So they go and try to exterminate the root causes of disease and infestation. So he might be called upon to go and help a farmer be rid of a tree that's been infected by some kind of vermin or illness, or
Hmm.
perhaps be called to a town that has people in it who are all falling mysteriously ill, and it's his job to identify the problem and be rid of it. So I think his last name really comes and like adds some oomph to him
Hmm.
a little bit. It's great.
So how do you spell Shalia?
So Shalia in the Warhammer canon, I mean, you can make it what you want, is spelled Shallya.
Interesting.
Shalia.
Okay. So yeah, you could definitely take this NPC, and if you're like, "Oh, great, yes, I'm playing a Warhammer game," then like just drag and drop into Warhammer. But otherwise, we could certainly get creative in a D&D sort of context. So like, okay, so like cuz the way you're describing this priestly figure is like, okay, so they're like, they deal with like they look like the picture at least I'm getting is like, oh, clearly a plague doctor sort of a look, like,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
works with in the domain of nature. I don't know about necessarily like circle of spores druid or just like some sort of like cleric of rot or whatever it is, but it's like, there is an infestation here and I must cleanse and purify it with fire or whatever it is. Kind of a vibe.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I mean, there's got to be equivalent gods in the pantheon that whoever's listening, you
Yeah.
must have like a death god or a god of like a healing god. I think the death god in D&D is Kelemvor. Am I saying that right? The Lord of the Dead.
Like I remember my Dawn War Pantheon from 4E, and then when I started homebrewing, it's like, well, I've got my own versions of the Dawn War people, then plus others that I've added as time has gone on. So it's just like at this point, I'm just like, I don't know the Forgotten Realms deities or Greyhawk deities because that seems cool for the new 2024 books is that they're going more Greyhawk. So that's kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
Haven't been there in a while, so maybe I will have to go check it out just to go see the world of Greyhawk. So
But I really like the like plague mask. I hadn't thought of that, and I'm definitely stealing that. So we're gonna make that canon for Ambrose. He's definitely wearing some kind of like plague doctor mask with like the long nose, all made out of leather. I'm really liking that
mm.
visual. I think that's a super cool visual.
Ooh, hoo, hoo, hoo. All right, so we've got his job or role in society is he's a priest of this particular deity, which is sent to like root out, exterminate like rot and disease and filth and stuff like that. Is basically what you're envisioning.
Yeah. Let's go with that.
Okay, and then let's see what is the age range of our character. Like, do you have like a specific number of like how old is he, or like is there like a vague age range of how you picture Ambrose?
I kind of picture him as being a young adult, maybe like in his 20s, early
Okay,
20s,
okay,
something
young
like
adult.
that.
Okay, All right, I dig.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you had rolled on if you had rolled on the table, that would have just been a 3 on a D8. So yeah, young adult, perfect. Okay, so like somewhere in his 20s as a human. So like, all right, very good. So now the question, I normally say, oh, now we're going to take a pause on the dice rolling because now that we know these details so far, can you come up with a physical description? So we're going to paint a picture. So Ambrose Eusebius, the exterminator cleric, who's somewhere in his 20s and is a human. So what we've already discussed and agree upon, like, okay, he's got like the plague doctor mask thing going on, but like what else is going on with him as like a physical description?
Okay, so I have some stuff figured out already, and I think maybe our random table will help us. But my inspiration for Ambrose, funnily enough, I thought it'd be funny to have this like plague doctor character who kind of looks like, and in some cases acts like, Prince Charming from Shrek. I thought like the juxtaposition of this like pretty boy type character
Mm-hmm.
who also happens to have to deal with like illness and disease and get rid of it felt
Mm-hmm.
like a very interesting an interesting like combination of two worlds. So to me, that's kind of what Ambrose looks like, this like very chiseled face, blonde wavy hair that he takes far too well care of,
Mm-hmm.
despite his constant interaction with like the terminally sick and the like diseased. He's very obsessed about his appearance.
Mm-hmm.
um well groomed, blue, like piercing blue eyes, very handsome, a beautiful man, if
Mm-hmm.
I could say.
Yeah,
um
like a Fabio kind of.
yeah, exactly. um so that's kind of where my head was at, but I'd love to throw in a couple of other dimensions. I don't know if we have, like, let's maybe roll on it and see like how we can add more complexity to him, if you're cool with that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't have any specific random tables for like, physical descriptions. So like maybe if you found one for yourself that
Oh,
wanted
okay.
to roll on, you're certainly more than welcome to, but I'm happy to spitball. So
Yeah, give me some ideas here, Kurt. What else can
yeah,
we do?
yeah, sure. So I mean, so he's wearing this plague doctor outfit, and cleric robes and stuff like that. So we're imagining he serves some sort of healing god, is what we said, or like a death god. So his probably his iconography is gonna and his garb is gonna reflect that as part of his
Hmm.
ensemble. And then when he like takes the mask off and he shakes his hair on his shoulders, and it's like, oh, hello, you, Prince Charming. It's like, oh, I'm here. Let me get that pus and the blisters and the wounds all addressed. So he's not
Yeah,
squeamish. Like
yeah.
he's actually like he's ready to like dive in there and like attend to the sick and the dying and all that.
Okay, yeah, let's do it. Yeah, not squeamish. um I like the idea of him being, like kind of like a physical, like a pretty big presence, like he's
Mm.
he's a big he's a big man, takes care of himself, but I think probably pretty vain too. He's
Oh.
yeah, I think there's got to be some kind of layering to his vanity, maybe a little bit self-indulgent, kind of a,
Mm.
call it a weakness if you will, where
Okay.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
it sounds like it's kind of blending into our next question because we usually, to like help, once we have like an idea of how they physically would appear, it's like we try and narrow it down for the role play elements of like, okay, what 3 adjectives best describe Ambrose Eusebius? So there is some vanity in there, but he's also kind of like bold, or he's like not afraid to like get into the muck and the grime and the dirt and the wounds and the filth and all this to be able to like cleanse it and purify it. Is there like some
Hmm.
sort of like, so he's bold, he's fearless, he has this vain streak in him, because I'm just wondering where that comes from. Is it like a sense of like piety or superiority or something like that, or I don't know, what how are you envisioning these 3 adjectives that are going to work to try and encapsulate Ambrose?
Yeah, I kind of like the dichotomy there that exists, right? he's bold, he's fearless, but also he's vain and a little bit like conceited or selfish. Perhaps it comes from a place of trying to prove his self-worth.
Mm,
I like the idea that maybe he's doing this to get somebody's attention, somebody he doesn't have their approval yet. I mean, I don't really know who that is.
sure.
Maybe it's a head priest in
Yeah.
that order that he's a part of, where he you know everybody thinks of him as just this pretty face and nobody takes him seriously. So he's trying to selfishly do all of these things that are good and right and brave, but ultimately it's for this approval that he can't seem to get.
Ooh, I was thinking kind of like an interesting opposite because well, it would certainly be like an opposite, certainly of like Saint Damien of Molokai, who is the famous Franciscan priest who went to Hawaii and tended to the lepers, and in the course of doing so, being very merciful and just, succumbed to leprosy himself. So,
Mm.
you were talking about like, oh, Ambrose is seeking this approval. Maybe it's or maybe the angle that I'm coming at or trying to think and speak into words into a microphone is like, oh, what if it's this darker vanity of like, see, like you expect all your other priests to like go out there and they, it's like this hopeless cause of them, tending to all this disease, this never ending plague or whatever it is. But look, I'm able to do all that and succeed, and I can still make myself like shine like the heavens themselves. And here I am, in the grime, in the thick of it. And you said that I wouldn't be able to amount to it. And look, I'm able to do it and bear the visage of our God himself or whatever.
Yeah, no, I love that so much. And I think both of these things can exist, right? He can seek for that approval and be fabulous while doing it.
Yeah.
So I love that a lot. I think that's fantastic.
Okay. And so then, okay, so we've got bold, we've got kind of like reckless or fearless, and then this vanity or this vainness or something. Okay, so those are our three adjectives, I guess, that kind of like work to help round out.
Yeah.
Okay, so now's the part where I'm like, and now we get to go back to some dice rolling. So we like all
Cool.
of our NPCs to have something cool on their person, a valuable. So what's going to be a valuable item? A piece of lore, a secret, or an ideal or concept that Ambrose Eusebius would ascribe to. So if you're wanting to randomize this is where you get to
Let's
do
do it.
two dice rolls, because you roll a d4 for the category and then you roll a d6 for the particular thing. Sometimes if you're just spitballing, you might have like a couple of items, but I don't know. What fits in that category?
So let's definitely give us a category. So we said it was a D4
Yes,
for the category.
correct.
Right. So we got a 4. What do
Ooh,
we
okay,
got?
so this is an ideal or concept.
Okay,
And then it's a
ideal or
d6 for the particular thing.
So what kind of ideal or concept does he bring with him, eh? Okay, let's see what we get. We got a 6.
6. Wow. Okay, this is very interesting. Okay, so this was suggested by previous guest Katie DeMatteis. Nihilism.
Whoa,
Yeah.
okay.
So how does the nihilism factor into this?
Hmm.
Is this like a deeply seated, like in his heart of hearts, he's a nihilist, but like on the outward vain part of the outside, it's like, no, I'm like this shiny golden angelic figure and I'm here helping the people, but like really what's eating at him deep inside is like, I do all this and like none of it matters, and like why should we be like helping the sick and stuff like that, but yet I'm compelled to do it. I don't know. What do you
I
think of that?
wonder, maybe I'm like stretching the definition a little bit of nihilism, but what if Ambrose, when he goes to exterminate these illnesses, rejects all other moral principles? Like to him, this person is sick. They're going to get everybody else sick. There's no talking me out of it. They're dead. Like I'm exterminating this person point
Oh,
blank. You know what I mean? Like all other moral principles are out the window when it comes to
mm,
him serving his objective.
Mm.
I don't know. Does that fit? Is that a little bit too like black and white? I know that
Well, I
doesn't
mean,
make for
but that's
super
kind of what
interesting.
nihilism is all about. It's like things are clear cut, black and white, and it's like all bad. And
Yeah.
you're the illusion of free choice and free will and all this stuff, and like chaos reigns supreme, and just being evil and well, vindictive. I know certainly in the zeitgeist right now, the second Joaquin Phoenix Joker movie's out, and so definitely that is a film series that exemplifies nihilism. Certainly, and I'm sure there are other great movies out there that
Hmm.
exemplify nihilism as well. I'm not a movie podcast, but certainly I would recommend you checking out someone smarter than me on cinema to recommend it. If you're able to take those like gentle dives into nihilism, certainly I don't encourage anyone to embrace nihilism in real life, but for our games of D&D for NPCs, it's totally fine. So yeah, it's kind of like I got the image of the GIF in my head, the GIF of what is it? I think it was like a short film that Corridor Digital did as a tie-in for the Tom Clancy MMORPG open world game in New York City, where it was like the dollar bill virus. And so the people are coming in with flamethrowers and they're just like burning everyone. That's kind of like the image of like, he presents this image of like, oh, I'm this golden boy savior and I've come to save you all. It's like, yes, let me lead these people into a building. Don't worry, I will tend to them. And then they're like, great, we're waiting on the healing. And he's like, that's when the shift happens. The
Yeah,
nihilism
yeah.
engages, and he's just like, burn all of you or whatever. And
Locks
so,
the door and he's like, "Yeah, I did my duty."
yeah,
Yeah, that's a little dark, but let's go there. Let's do it.
yeah, yeah.
That's Ambrose
Certainly,
now.
talk to your game table and everything like that. Make sure like this kind of an NPC is cool, or you know your players and you know how you can tweak the dials. We need our bad guys, quote unquote bad guys, to do evil things. So certainly someone who's a nihilist that's like, oh, I have to heal the community and protect them. Yeah, probably would justify the ends would justify the means to be like, well, these 5 people were sick with a disease that I can't cure, so I'm just going to burn them alive, and then just and maybe that's why the vanity thing comes into play, because like maybe it's kind of eating at him a little bit, and so he's like, I have to be
Mm,
clean, and so that's why he takes such great care and presenting such a clean image because of all the deep-seated nihilism that he carries in his heart, which like
yeah,
obviously would contradict and conflict with this public persona that he gives of this like oh, golden hairs and piercing blue eyes, and I'm just a pretty boy, but yet
yeah,
I'm doing all this dark stuff.
yeah. He comes with his problems, and I like it too because, like you said, Kurt, he doesn't need to be good or bad. It kind of creates this gray zone where it's like, yeah, he's working for a good order,
Hmm.
generally speaking,
Right,
but he's basically committing these atrocities in the name of that order. It might not even be what the order wants him to be doing, but he's
right,
doing them anyway. Um, so it can create this interesting scenario where I hope other people listening to this introduce Ambrose to their world, and he might be like your next villain, or he might be nobody. But
right.
there's room there for growth. Definitely, I like
Yeah,
this. I
I
like
feel
this a
like
lot.
this, Ambrose is definitely operating somewhere like in the rural area. He's like far removed away from like the
Hmm.
actual guiding hand of his leadership, of his order, and of his religion. And so he's taken like this extremist, fundamentalist, nihilistic sort of view to carry out the will of his god. And because maybe he may be the only authority in the area on the matter, there's no one there to check him. And
Hmm.
so could definitely present some interesting moral quandaries to your party of like, oh, like this plague ridden land, this is like the one safe respite we've been able to find. And it's like, oh, here's this priest that's like, he's leading the town, and maybe there's like that weird, uncanny feeling. And it's just like Ambrose is there doing his thing. It's like, but wait a minute, there was the one sick person there yesterday, but like
Yeah,
now he's
they're
not
gone
showing
now.
up, and Ambrose doesn't seem as rattled because like that was someone important that we needed to talk to, and they just had like a little cough. Like it wasn't anything major. They weren't presenting life or death symptoms. It was like he just had a cough, and now suddenly the person we needed to talk to is gone. Like, yeah, mystery and intrigue
Definitely.
and stuff.
Yeah, I love it.
Okay. And then of course, our NPCs, we like them to be able to offer up side quests to player characters, to
Mhm.
adventurers, to heroes. So, what's going to be the side quest that Ambrose Eusebius needs the player characters to go and do? If you need to roll randomly, you get to roll a d12, or if you have an idea, what do you think's a reasonable side quest that Ambrose might be willing to offer up?
Yeah. I have an idea based on everything we've just been saying and the picture we've been painting. I like the idea that Ambrose knows the limitations of what he can do.
Mm-hmm.
So he might send the party off to be rid of some kind of abomination, some vile abomination that's causing some of this illness perhaps in his domain. Maybe it's a scouting mission to get information. Maybe it's an extermination mission. But he needs the party's help to go and be rid of whatever bile monster lives in the woods. That's maybe it's infesting the water source of the village or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so it is going to be like on the surface, kind of like, like, hey, I need your help. Like, obviously, I have this flock to attend to here, so I can't like go out and do it myself. So, okay, so we're going to recruit the party to go on this scouting
Yeah.
or extermination mission for Ambrose. So that seems pretty straightforward. So, what is going to be the reward? How is Ambrose going to reward the party for their efforts in succeeding? Like they go and they
Mhm.
deliver a report that's successful, or they successfully identify whatever it is, or it's something they have to fight. They fight the thing. They bring back proof that it's dead. How is Ambrose going to reward the party?
How is he going to reward the party? So I play in games with very little magic. So maybe this isn't. You might have to help me, Kurt, in making this an appropriate gift in the context of a space where like revivifies are an option. But
Okay.
I'd like to think that Ambrose is a very gifted healer. He just doesn't often employ that side of him. So
Hmm.
I think he could offer to heal some kind of ongoing ailment that a member of the party might have, or perhaps they have an NPC friend who's sick and dying, and he could do something, kind of offer his services, kind of a service for service exchange.
Hmm.
Um, that, or it might be interesting for Ambrose to offer up some kind of insights or access to his order.
Okay.
Maybe it's like a letter of invitation to go visit the head office or whatever, wherever it may be, often some further lands.
Okay.
That's kind of where I'm thinking. One of those two areas. I don't know if you
Okay.
have other ideas.
Yeah, well, I mean, okay, so you in your game you play with like low magic, whereas I guess
Yeah.
technically for me, I guess my game would be very high magic. So okay, so you could obviously change it and make adjustments to whatever game that Ambrose is going to appear in. So if in a low magic setting, he becomes very valuable because he actually can cast these healing magics to be able to like remove curses, greater restorations, that kind of stuff, which is very interesting. So how does that feed into, he has this idea of nihilism, and normally it sounds like he wouldn't, to me, my read on it is like, oh, if they have a follower retainer character and like he has the sniffles, like in his extreme view, like I feel like Ambrose would be like, I want to kidnap that NPC and like execute him
Mm,
because like there's, he's done for. So the fact that he's willing to offer up like healing magical services definitely seems like a big juxtaposition, unless it's kind of like a
yeah.
more like or hypocriticalness of like, oh, so he's willing to heal the player characters and their important friends, but anyone else, like, no, they can't be left to chance and
Yeah.
can't live.
I mean, yeah, that's a good point. I think perhaps he's gonna have to have kind of a set of principles where if the character has an illness that is contagious, then
Mm,
100% he wants them dead. But
okay.
if it's like they have a broken arm or they have a bleeding, like a severe bleeding injury or
Hmm.
some kind
Got
of
stabbed in the course of their mission or whatever.
yeah, and now again I'm thinking maybe in the D&D context that's kind of a superfluous thing because it's so easy to heal. But it could be maybe exhaustion. Maybe he can remove exhaustion.
Does he have a particular magic item on his person that,
He could, yeah.
that to him in his anathema, his self anathema, in his nihilism, he has this because he was given it by his order, but in his nihilistic worldview, he doesn't think that it's worth anything to him because, oh, the methods that I'm using and employing are doing the will of my God just fine. So I
Hmm.
don't need this anymore. And then he's able to play it off in his vanity to be like, oh, brave, adventurous heroes, here, you can take this healing item that will let you do these wondering healing. And then they're like, wow, this guy's really powerful, and he gave us this thing. And then to him, to Ambrose, it's like a way of like ridding himself of that hypocritical, like, oh, you serve this god and you're supposed to use this item to like heal and cure people, but at the same time, he's like, no, 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 why waste it when my methods are just as good?
Yeah, no, I like that a lot. That's super cool. Now I'm just looking up what like kind of um charms and necklaces and things might exist.
Isn't there
But
like
definitely,
the parapet of healing of life or something like that? A parapet of health, that's what it is. A wondrous uncommon item. You are immune to contracting any disease while you wear this pendant. If you are already infected with a disease, the effects of the disease are suppressed. You are suppressed while you wear the pendant. So like that's
yeah,
like
that sounds
that's an
on
uncommon
brand.
item. Like, not like every day, but it's like, these are things that he can get. He's expected to wear it himself as as this priest, as this cleric, who has to literally go in to plague-ridden areas to cure them. And that's like, oh, this is your safeguard to make sure that you don't get infected. But he's like, I don't have to worry about something like this because I
Yeah.
literally just eliminate the problem. So it
I,
doesn't
I
spread
almost
and doesn't overwhelm.
Yeah, I almost suspect him to have like an overabundance of these things. Like maybe he's meant to provide them to like the leaders of town and heal them with
Oh,
it. And he's just like, well, no, why would I do that? They need to go, and he just gets rid of them. So he's got, I don't want to say an overabundance, but let's say
right.
he's got enough to give out for sure.
He has
Um,
enough to give to the party. So if we're imagining a group of anywhere between like 4 to 6 or 7 adventurers or something like that, depending on the size of your party, the appropriate amount of your adventuring party. Hey, conveniently enough, he has parapets of health for everyone, and it's a wondrous item. It doesn't take one of your magic attunement slots, and so it takes the next slot item. But now you are immune to contracting disease, and you can suppress a disease if you are currently infected with something. So actually, maybe it's something for me to hear or listen to on an episode of Roleplay Chat. But like, for example, like if someone has vampirism or lycanthropy,
mhm,
does wearing this suppress the effects of being a vampire or a werewolf
I would think so. To me,
based on
those
how
are
it's
diseases.
written?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, like it's like, oh, is it a curse or is it a disease? So I guess it's like how you read it. And I'm sure I'm sure if you haven't, there's got to be an episode of that on your podcast, right? Of
I
like,
mean, I haven't talked about that. So maybe Kurt, when you come join me, we'll have, that could be a contender for
ooh,
for our conversation.
well, there we
We'll
go.
see. We'll see.
Yeah, because there's certainly you go on enough Reddits or you go on enough websites and people argue back and forth, like rules as written versus like the spirit of the letter or the letter of the law, that kind of thing. So Yeah, I could see it both ways. It's like, oh, rules is written. I guess it would constitute a disease, but in some cases it could be a curse. But very interesting. Yeah. So he has enough of these to be able to hand out to the party, and they're like, great. We're walking through these plague lands, and now we don't have to worry about contracting the disease. But they don't, they otherwise don't know or understand the grave significance of him having this number of these to be able to hand out to the party.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I like the idea that he sends them on the quest before giving them this is the reward for going to do what he asks them to do. So if the party chooses not to or can't complete it, they don't get to have these pendants, which will serve to be extremely helpful in the environment that they're in. I like the idea too of, what might happen should they pass on his side quest.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect lead in. What's going to be the consequence of failure or refusing the call to the adventure?
Yeah. And I think the consequences, you can kind of think of them in different tiers, but in the world where Ambrose is vying for more attention in his vanity, he wants to prove himself, gain stature in his order. If the party doesn't get rid of this thing for Ambrose, then I can imagine that environment gets worse. The surrounding cities get plagued by whatever this disease might be in Ambrose's town. And it just gives Ambrose more work to do. It just makes him a more valuable resource in the order, which would kind of serve his objective of becoming more powerful, getting more attention, achieving his goals, to possibly becoming a larger threat against the party as being this like nihilistic individual.
The hidden heresy.
Yeah.
He basically, maybe because he's on the outskirts, he doesn't have any traction, but because the party doesn't help, it actually helps him to further and cement his heretical views of his order. And so more people begin to follow his example, and they're like, oh, Ambrose Eusebius is great. We need to give him more power and responsibility. So he continues to rise through the ranks. And then, suddenly it's like, yeah, like these weird teachings start showing up, and then there's infighting in the religion. Maybe there's a schism. Maybe there's just like a civil war within the church or whatever it is. It's like, or it gets revealed, that Ambrose has been following like a dark god who's been whispering in his ear. And then it's like an oath breaker sort of a situation. And now it's like he's been twisted and corrupted, and now his nihilism is on full force. And yeah, it's like another way for the dark forces to further their goals of like, destroying life and communities and the world and all that stuff. Is like, oh, we were so busy trying to like infect everyone, when really what we need to do is just give one person enough motivation to go full unhinged and trying to create their utopia, that they destroy everything in the process of trying to create this perfect society or whatever.
Yeah. I really like that. I think that's fantastic, because it gives people listening, and I mean me, motivation to have kind of like tiers of consequence. Yeah. Oh, the first consequence is, disease starts to spread. Oh, it's not good. So as the party continues along, they might encounter more and more of this illness. But long term, there are consequences where Ambrose is going to be pushing his his objective, which, while it's unhinged, isn't necessarily evil, but it'll slowly teeter its way into that. So the party,
the Eusebian heresy. That sounds just very much like a Warhammer thing. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. So yeah, as the problem continues to fester and the party ignores it or doesn't address it, like suddenly this major religion of your world is going to have like a takeover. It's going to have a schism, a split. the heresy gets found out. And so now there's these like roving bands of like nihilistic priests on the road that like they're demanding to know whether you're clean and pure or not. And if they suspect anything wrong, then they're just going to like attack you in the name of cleansing and stuff like that. And more of the dark powers and forces grow. So, ooh, spooky, definitely appropriate for the Halloween times, and just
Totally.
definitely something, this definitely does feel like something out of 40K for sure. Like the actual Warhammer, maybe more actual Warhammer than Warhammer 40K, because it took me a long. I remember first encountering 40K in junior high, and I was like, "Oh, Warhammer 40K, like that's it." But then I was like, "Oh, there's a Warhammer," and it's like the medieval TTRPG wargaming version of 40K, which is Dune-esque. And now it's like, we've got Warhammer, so this is like
Definitely.
yeah, that whole realm. Okay,
Yeah. It's very like eldritch in a fantasy world, basically. That's the Warhammer world, the Warhammer fantasy world. And I mean, as I've been talking about these plagues and illness and things, I can't help but think of the Warhammer god of this, or the demon, is called Nurgle. So for people listening, if you want inspiration on the kinds of enemies or the kinds of illness that can be born from this kind of scenario, just go look up Nurgle, the demon Nurgle in the Warhammer world, and you'll find all kinds of inspiration for his minions and the kinds of challenges that the party might have to face up against.
Yeah, I'm imagining the further future that this hypothetical goes along of him like being duped by this god of rot and chaos. And so it kind of becomes like, if it gets far enough along, or maybe you put this far enough in your past, and there's like he becomes like this saintly sort of figure, but who serves like this god of death and rot and disease and plague and stuff like that. But yet he's this shiny golden, fallen angelic sort of a guy. So kind of, very Luciferian in that way of like, I was trying to do the right thing. Don't you see? I was trying to save you all, but yet in doing that, he, damned himself essentially. So
Totally.
yeah, very tragic in that way.
Very cool. Now I want to like run a whole campaign with with Ambrose as the main villain.
There we go. Yep. See, we just give away great ideas on this podcast. So can't wait to hear the next actual play that's produced by Roleplay Chat, and we get to hear more about Ambrose Eusebius. Okay, cool. So yeah, big consequences for sure. Are there any other optional questions that you want to explore with Ambrose, or do you feel like this is a good character?
I think we've covered a lot. I think we might have even covered some of the optional questions without meaning to. So I'm good. Yeah.
All right. Well, without further ado, let's head into a random encounter. This random encounter is brought to you by my sponsor, Zencastr. Zencastr came into my life when I didn't think I would need it, but now I definitely need it with trying to raise a family and keep the podcast episodes flowing and all that stuff, and not trying to keep myself awake for all hours of the night trying to get these episodes edited. Thanks to Dane and Benjamin over at Dispel Magic showing me this service, I was hooked. And I decided to become a paying member so I could get access to all these awesome tools with editing and getting these great episodes to you. So it is so easy and super easy now to record a podcast with Zencastr. You log into your browser and you start recording a high quality podcast right away. You could record studio quality sound and up to 4K video with your guests. Feel a sense of zen, knowing Zencastr's multi-layered backups ensure you always have your recordings in the highest quality, even if the connection is unstable. A hard sell. On that point alone, I've been podcasting for a couple of years now. That is amazing. So that is a great selling point of this service. You can sound your best. Have you ever worried what you might sound like on a podcast? With Zencastr's post-production process, it makes you sound buttery smooth. It automatically removes the ums and ahs as you click on that feature. in the post-production settings, and in your recordings, it's going to remove those awkward pauses and conversations too with the click of a button. Set the right podcast loudness and levels while reducing background noise with a click of a button. It really is that easy. It's all in one. If you have thought about podcasting before and realized that you need a lot of different tools and services, those days are done. With Zencastr's all-in-one podcasting platform, you can create your podcast all in one place and distribute to Spotify, Apple, and all other major podcast destinations. Go to zencastr.com/pricing and use my code SIDEKQPodcast, and you'll get 30% off your first month of any Zencastr paid plan. I want you to have the same easy experiences I do for all my podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story. Again, the website, zencastr.com/pricing. Use the code SIDEKQPodcast and get 30% off your first month of any Zencastr paid plan. Thank you so much to the sponsor, and back to the podcast. All right, so this is the part of the show now where we get to do a role play, a vignette, a scene with Ambrose Eusebius, the priest. But the question becomes, who am I going to be in the scene? And what kind of like scene are we going to present? So it could be, the Ambrose Eusebius meets one of the podcast adventuring characters and gives them the task of going to investigate the thing or slay the beastie or whatever it is that's causing the issue. It could be Ambrose maybe having the commission from his order to like go out to this area to go deal with this thing. Is it just a slice of life and maybe like to really like twist the screws of the nihilism of like, oh, it's just like a sweet scene of him like dealing with the sick, but then he's gonna do whatever dark nihilistic thing he's gonna do to like rid these sick people from the community, or I don't know what kind of obviously sensitivity and stuff like that. I feel like we do a pretty good job in this podcast of not really diving too deep. So certainly, if that's the option we're going to choose, then definitely for sure, I'll make sure I do a disclaimer at the very, very beginning of the podcast, but certainly whatever scene you are interested in exploring with good safety tools in mind, I am willing to take that journey with you. So what kind of scene are you interested in?
Yeah, I mean, I think it might be fun to emulate an encounter with Ambrose, as if the party were encountering him in the town, doing about his business, just to kind of perhaps showcase what that might be for people listening, and then you all can kind of go off the rails if you want with Ambrose and make him do whatever it is that you feel so motivated to do. But I think that could be kind of fun.
Okay. So meeting one of the podcast adventurer characters, the staple of characters that we've developed for this section of the show. So we have a whole list, and I'll roll through them real quick. So we've got Duncan. He's the recklessly brave adventurer for hire, happy-go-lucky, no task too small, no feat too daring. We have Sonia, who's the warrior woman. She started off as a barbarian and then multi-classed into a paladin who serves a god who wishes to redeem the undead. We have Korak. He is the lawful evil, arcane, trickster, roguish dwarf. We have Chrisley. She's the herbalist, botanist, wood elf druid, who then multi-classed into a cleric who serves living memory. We have Orion, who's the astral elf illusionist wizard. I play him like a Spock kind of a guy. We've got Agape, who is the lilac-colored tiefling Sorlock. Started off as a wild magic, Feywild-inspired sorcerer, and then made a pact with Prosperina, the archfey NPC made on the show. So she's a Sorlock. And then the most recent character that we have introduced into the roster is Lifespell, the necromancer, and his faithful skeletal manservant Octavius. So with those kind of characters in mind, what sort of scene are you interested in sharing a scene with?
I mean, I'm good to roll on it. Let's see who we get.
Sure.
There's 8 of them, I think. Is that what you said?
I believe we made it to 8. Yeah.
Okay, let's roll. Let's see who we get. We got 2.
Okay, well that would be Sonia.
There you go. That's the warrior paladin person, yeah?
Yes, she started off as a barbarian, and
Good.
then she had an encounter with Axios, the Revenant priest, and now she follows a god whose task is to redeem the undead. So similar departments, but different bosses, it seems.
That's cool.
Where we last left our hero Sonia, she had left the city that she and Axios had been at and been long working. Axios had stayed in the town, and he advised Sonia, hey, you're going to travel out of town. You're going to go on this, you're going to wander a little bit, but you're going to see something and you know it. And she came across this crashed advanced balloon device, and it had Steinway, the tween goth emo kid, and Mabel, the skeleton who communicated with Common Sign. And they needed Sonia's help to be able to slay a black pudding that was in the nearby cave so they could put it into the magical jerry cans, which could then be refined as the fuel that the arcane advanced balloon, hot air balloon, needed to be able to return back to the evil lich overlord. We'll say during that time, Sonia was able to use her wits and her powers as both a barbarian and a paladin to deal with the black pudding, retrieve the remnants of it in the jerry cans, and refuel the balloon. During that time, she was able to speak with Mabel and talk to her about this god who redeems the undead. And so there's been a rapport there. There's an invitation. And so, she couldn't, obviously they serve the evil lich overlord. So she couldn't commit to something right now, but she's planted a seed, and that could soon spread to other members of this undead army. So for now, Sonia bids them farewell, but she says, for them to keep in touch. And as we're continuing on, she's pressing further and further out into the community. She's feeling the call of her god. She's trying to learn and understand more about how her god works as this newbie paladin, but she feels herself being pulled to this community. It is a community that has been affected by the workings of this lich overlord, who seeks to grow his undead armies with skeletons and zombies and plagues and whatever else. But it's a quiet, peaceful hamlet that Sonia soon finds herself stumbling across. And so as she's entering this town, and she's been seeing like the signs of like the looming gathering storm clouds and the evidence of like, oh, there were battles over here. There was conflict over here. Here's the remnants of like, piles of where they burned bodies and stuff like that. So she's getting closer and closer to this community, and she's finding something. She was expecting maybe like a deserted town, but she's finding a thriving place. So what does that look like as she enters into this community?
Yeah, so I'm gonna picture the community as being kind of a lumber town close to a large forest with a handmade palisade wall that's just logs, log palisade surrounding the town with a couple of guard towers on either end, and you can sort of see the roofs of small thatched buildings. When she gets to the front gate, it's unguarded. There's nobody preventing her or asking her any questions, and she kind of approaches the town, and the small town appears quite quiet. She can see people poking their head out windows or looking through, glass windows, but for the most part, it's kind of eerie.
Mm-hmm.
Off in the distance, in one of the guard towers, she sees a guard that kind of asks her to stop, to wait. Is she bringing any contaminants with her? And she might not quite know what's going on.
Right. Yeah. I think she's going to call up and respond like, that I'm, that she's not sick, that, that she is, strong in health, and that she serves a god who wishes to redeem the undead. And I think she'll name that god out loud very proudly in this very paladin sort of way. She'll just be like, this is the god I serve. He redeems the undead. And I've seen the evidence coming in this way. I know that the Lich Kings, the Lich army, teases on the beyond the lands over that way. But like I'm untouched. Basically, is what she's communicating.
Right. So she's instructed by the guard to wait by the town hall down the path near the well. I presume she follows the instructions, and when she gets there, she notices that the well is boarded up, and there's a couple of buildings near the town hall that are also boarded up with kind of makeshift wood planks. And from the town hall, the only stone building in the environment here in the village, out comes a tall, imposing figure. Under his arm, he holds a mask with a long nose made of leather and his flowing robes. And he approaches her and welcomes her. "Hello, welcome. You look like you've traveled far."
Yeah, and Sonia looks down, and she definitely like her armor and her which is hide and leather, but also she has the bits of the paladin robes and stuff like that go over the armor. It's clearly muddied. It's seen fraying and stuff at the ends of it. She looks down, looks over her appearance, and she's like, "Yeah, I've been on the road for quite a way and following the call of my god down this way." And you are?
"Oh, I am Ambrose Eusebius. Pleasure to meet you." And he just bows. He makes an active effort not to shake hands or touch his new friend.
Mm.
Um,
She'll return the
then
bow, but awkwardly.
okay, yeah. He definitely does so very gracefully, his hair flowing. There seems to be like a breeze that comes out of nowhere just to kind of have his locks, his blonde locks sway in the air. And he proceeds to explain to her the situation of his village. He tells her that this lich seems to be wreaking disease and spreading it across the land in order to kill innocent people to then raise them up again as part of his army. And he was sent to this town to protect it and to make sure that the people don't fall victim to his illness. He's done so by instructing everybody to stay apart from one another, to stay in their homes, and as soon as they show any symptom, to come see him, where he will treat them in the town hall.
Mm.
As he says this, he kind of like has this metal staff that he kind of shows like that I use this for treatment. And at the tip of the staff there's kind of like a hook, almost like a cane, and you can see there there's like there's blood and there's things like dried up on it that seems to be he constantly used for quote unquote treating the sick. He then asks for her help. He basically says, I can't possibly leave town. The people here are too vulnerable. But our water supply has been damaged. Or not damaged, but infected, rather. The taint of some vile abomination plagues our water source out in the forest. Would you help us in ridding and scouting the area and perhaps be ridding the creature that infects our water?
She nods and she listens. She turns her head as if she's hearing like divine whisperings. And she regards his appearance, this shining, clean, pristine sort of a figure. Would she recognize any of the religious symbols on his appearance. Like, probably, like we were saying earlier, like same zip code of like common area that they serve, but yet they're completely different gods.
Yeah, I would think that she would recognize some of the symbols. There's definitely going to be um like laurel leaves
Mm-hmm.
on the shoulders, and perhaps a vulture on like the breastplate that
Mm.
Ambrose wears under his robes. And
Mm-hmm.
she recognizes this as being kind of symbology for Kellamore,
Mm-hmm.
the Lord of the Dead, and kind of the judge of those who pass on. Uh,
Mm. Okay.
and this might not be somebody that she's super familiar with, but like you said, definitely knows that, okay, this guy is some kind of death priest or something, I would think.
Right. Yeah, and if Sonia were to do a insight check, and let's say for drama purposes, let's say like in this instance, like because of the eeriness of the town and like what he's explained and seeing this staff with the blood on the end of it, if she rolls her insight check and she gets like really high on her insight in this instance, when normally like, oh, she's this barbarian paladin and oh, meathead and stuff like that, but no, like in this instance, because like they're talking about their domain and stuff like that and what's going on in the
Mm-hmm.
wider world, she really wants to make sure that she understands this guy. So with her high insight check that she gets, maybe a crit or something like that, like what is she able to glean from his speech, and what is she picking up on what he's not saying?
Yeah. Well, I think she would definitely pick up that he fervently believes that he's the best thing that could have happened to this town. He thinks very highly of himself. He thinks that these people would have been doomed without him here. And he could very well be right. I would say that he probably is right.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what he's not saying is that he doesn't want to perhaps inform her too much about his methods. I think he
Mm-hmm.
might know that, especially seeing her as also being a religious, a member of an associated religion, he might be a little bit. Uh, what am I trying to say here? You know when you're elusive and you're like not fully answering the questions. Well,
Right.
when she asks about his methods, he's gonna be a little bit evasive
Yeah.
in stating
Cagey.
exactly. Yeah, he's gonna be a little bit cagey.
Okay. Yeah. And from her perspective, because she follows Axios, who literally has the charge of this particular god to redeem the undead, I imagine she's in a minority position. So like I would imagine like he's in a more mainline sort of accepted faith in this domain, and she
Mm.
has like this very obscure, very not understood, but as she's been working with Axios, more and more of the legends and stuff like that and the tales that are told of Axios himself are spreading. And so it's becoming maybe more in the zeitgeist in this local area, this continent, these lands, or what have you, of like, oh, yeah, there are these people that are acting in the world on behalf of this particular god who's working to redeem the undead. So, yeah, yeah. So Sonia in this case is kind of like, yeah, I think she's a little tense. I mean, she wants to help and she feels something in her pulling her to say, like, she does need to help because, she needs to redeem the undead. And if this is like an undead that's not willing to like change its way, its course, its path, then, she can't let these people be hurt. Uh, and so, yeah, I think, seeing how he didn't take a hand for the handshake, um, you know, like, because reflectively, maybe she goes to extend it to like agree to it, but he recoils or something. And so she's like, oh, yeah, right. He has a thing
Yeah.
about touching. And so she'll say, all right, very well. So something in the woods is affecting the water source. Right. And you have to stay here and protect them and make sure no one else gets sick. Yes, I can do this. Yes.
So he bows and like it's a very deep bow compared to the one that maybe he did in their greeting, where he kind of acknowledges her help. And he says, let me get you food, water. Do you need anything before you head off into the woods? And he kind of offers some hospitality. Now that she has agreed to help him, he kind of like,
sure, yeah. And she's noticing the switch, and maybe that's also kind of like weirding her out a little bit in this instance as well. Um, yeah, no, I think she's gonna smile politely, but maybe in this instance, because of her suspicions or this whispering from her god or whatever she's hearing, she'll just kind of like smile weakly and just be like, oh no, I'm fine. The people of this town need these supplies more than I do. I've got everything I need in my rucksack, and well, I'm a big girl, and anything that gets in my way that could be dinner, I'm perfectly happy with camping out under the stars. It's what I've done for many years before finding myself in this way.
Oh, so noble of you. Yes, yes. You're doing your god proud, I'm certain. And Kelmore will look down upon you with a smile as well, or perhaps look up, I should say. Yes, yes. Well, let me lead you. And he kind of, points towards the other side of the town, again with the palisade wall and the guard tower, and he brings her in that direction. And as he kind of explains to her some of the information about where the water the spring can be found, half a day's travel past the creek, and there's a troll cave. Watch out for the troll cave, and then it's just due east. He's kind of explaining where she should go to find the source of water. He then gets interrupted by somebody. It's a lady who is bringing her older mother or aunt, and the older individual is coughing, kind of like yakking up something. And Ambrose immediately tells the adventurer, like, "Oh, you must leave. I have urgent things to deal with." And he puts on his mask, and it's this very impressive motion, and it kind of just snaps onto his face, the large nose, the muffling of his voice. And he immediately tells the younger individual that Kelmore will help her passage. And he grabs the old lady and like basically rushes out and leaves towards kind of the town hall in the middle of town.
Yeah, and I think the final thing that closes out the scene is like, the young woman gets rushed back to where she needs to go, and Ambrose is taking the older woman to the town hall, and I imagine she watches from a distance as the town hall doors kind of slam, and it's this very eerie silence that then falls over the town. And so Sonia only has the crunching of twigs and grass and gravel and dirt under her feet as she continues on into the forest. And she just can't help but think that even though he serves good intentions, she can't but help but wonder if there's something more sinister lurking beneath the surface. And scene. Ooh boy. There we go. That was good. That was spooky. Yeah. Talking about the season that we're in right now. Yeah, but so there we go. We made it through the random encounter. So how was it getting to be Ambrose?
Oh, great. I want to play more Ambrose for sure. That was a lot of fun.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you. That was cool. That was really cool. I'm really looking forward to hearing if folks I don't know if this is like common practice, but if folks that listen to your show kind of adopt some of these NPCs, I'd love to hear about whether or not Ambrose kind of finds a home at other people's table.
Well, I know he's certainly going to find a home in my game. That's for sure. Like, I know exactly where in the world I can put him. So, like, he'll be a very interesting character for the heroes to come across and to, get this idea of like, oh, looks looks can be deceiving, and like what is truly in a person's heart, sort of a kind of thing.
Mhm.
So that's what the random tables do. They give us wild swings, and they help us make even more well-rounded characters with deeper depths and dimensions to them.
Totally.
Yeah.
I know, there's a lot to be said about random tables, but 100% they help fill in the gaps that we can't think of, and oftentimes they fill in the gaps in unexpected and better ways than we could have ever imagined. So
Indeed. So yeah, as we're here in the final thoughts section, I always like to get critiques and feedback from my guests. So certainly, as a fellow podcaster, it's like, how did I do on my report card today? If I passed the grade, if I aced the test today, and then finally, I give the microphone, the stage, the soapbox, the platform. So over to the guest to be able to promote themselves with their projects they're working on, where they can be found on social medias, and then any passions or causes that we need to be made aware of.
yeah, well, first of all, thank you, Kurt, for inviting me to talk and create NPCs with you today. It's been an absolute pleasure. As far as feedback goes, I just have positive things to say. This has been an extremely fun experience. I really love how actionable a lot of our conversation has been. I think that that's definitely something that I have to work on in my show, is that sometimes I get so deep in the philosophy that concrete examples sometimes are few and far between. And here tonight, I think we were able to give a lot of fun examples of NPCs that people can borrow, steal, adopt into their own games. So I can really appreciate that. I think that's really, really cool. And as far as me and what I do and where you can find me in my corner of the internet, I'm Matt Roleplay Chat. So that's ROLE_play_chat, wherever you do social media. I'm most active on Threads these days. Threads is a lot of fun, and kind of most of the TTRPG community has kind of migrated over there. It sounds like, because X is a bit of a dumpster fire, but I mean, I'm still there too, and I'm still posting on there. And then, if you liked this conversation or any of the other episodes that Kurt has recorded, you're probably going to like Roleplay Chat too. Roleplay Chat is a tabletop RPG discussion show with me and a guest. The episodes are all completely independent from one another, so you don't, you can go pick whatever episode sounds like a topic that's interesting to you, and you can go listen to it. We cover all kinds of stuff, ranging from the use of traps and puzzles to the philosophy of death saves to, session 0, you name it. There's probably an episode on it, if not 2. And yeah, that can be listened to wherever you find podcasts. And there's also like an audio only YouTube recording that I put up, and that comes out every other week on Wednesdays. So you can go listen to that.
Ooh, Wednesdays. That's when this show drops too. So your Wednesdays are going to be spent between Sidekicks and Sidequests and Roleplay Chat from now on. So there you go.
There you go. Perfect.
Excellent.
All you need. That's all you need.
That's all you need. And Matt, thank you so much for being a guest on the show. I can't wait to have you back on, making even more interesting NPCs.
Awesome. Bye, everybody.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Sidekicks and Sidequests. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast through Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Amazon Music, Overcast, or YouTube, or feel free to save the RSS feed to use the app or player of your choice. Visit our website, sidekicksandsidequests.com, for links, write-ups of the NPCs, and to learn more about the show and the guests who have been on it. To stay up to date and interact via social media, you can follow the podcast on Facebook, Instagram/Threads, Twitter/X, and Reddit by searching for SideKQ Podcast. You can also find our small Discord community as well online. I would love to talk D&D and showcase your fan art, stories of how you used our NPCs, discussions, and commentary. And hey, if you'd like to hail the bard and send me a message, an email, you can do so by communicating with sidekicksandsidequests@gmail.com. To help this show be the resource it's meant to be, I ask that you leave a review on iTunes, 5 stars please, to help spread the word and share our podcast with your friends and family. Whether you're a veteran player or an aspiring dungeon master, there's something here for everyone, and I want to hear about it. As mentioned in the NPC creations section of the podcast, I do in fact have a Patreon for Sidekicks and SideQuests. If you love this podcast and what we're trying to do here, I would appreciate it if you would just go to the website, patreon.com/sidekicks and sidequests. No matter your lifestyle expenses, we have wonderful rewards at every level of Patreon membership tier. Modest, comfortable, wealthy, and aristocratic accommodations await, and we welcome all patrons to the Levitating Platter. Seriously, your financial support allows for this passion project to continue to invest in itself through the tools that will take our production to the next level, as well as provide more content for our patrons and the community at large. Please consider supporting me on Patreon if you can.
Sidekicks and SideQuests is unofficial fan content permitted under the fan content policy.
Meaning I'm not approved or endorsed by Wizards.
Portions of the materials used are property of Wizards of the Coast.
Copyright Wizards of the Coast,
LLC.
Thank you for your support, and I'll see you at the pub next time.
Bar to rock on 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.